Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Musical Theater Project and our series, Let's Go to the Movies at Home. It's good to be back. We haven't seen you since December when our holiday attraction, as many of you know, was Meet Me in St. Louis, directed by Vincent Minnelli. And tonight, more Vincent Minnelli, except it's 26 years later. And he's directing Barbra Streisand and Yves Montand in On a Clear Day You Can See Forever. Clear Day is a most unusual show, as you've seen in the past week when you screen the film. If you've never done this Q&A with us before, make sure you read the instructions because they're important. They tell you how to participate, not just by using the chat, which allows you to quote. We're going to be able to quote your comments from the chat, but also it lets us see you on screen with musical theater lovers from around the country. So that's kind of fun. Debbie Schinker and Heidi Lang keep my co-host and me from getting into trouble. Technically, they really come through on that. And my co-host is Bob Knoll.
Thank you, Bill. Glad to be back.
Bob, it's good to see you back because last time when we did the film in December, your role was played by Nancy Meyer.
I don't have my piano tonight. So.
And she did right. And she did a really good job, but it's fun to have you return. There's something that I want to say right off the bat that's kind of important, which is that Bob and I and our colleagues, Tracy Dwyer and Heidi, we almost canceled this tonight, or at least postponed it, because of what we all witnessed yesterday, which was a national tragedy. But then we started to think about it a little more, and we said to ourselves, well, you know, the Musical Theater Project is about joy and hope, and our slogan is, as you know, learn, laugh, cry, love. And it's really in the spirit of joy and love that we're sharing the evening with you. And we're glad that you wanted to come, that you made the decision to be part of the series again, despite what we all experienced yesterday. So here we are, and let's do On a Clear Day You Can See Forever. It's a 1965 Broadway musical that starred Barbara Harris and John Cullum, but then Vincent Minnelli made a film version 5 years later in 1970, in which, as I said at the top, he directed Barbra Streisand, who I think was just 26 then, and Yves Montand. Bob, I know these last couple of times we've gone into the business of doing surveys, and we've sort of had fun doing that. And we're going to do one now, if you would do the honors.
Sure. But we want to find out how many of you like this film and how many of you didn't. Okay, it's really basic. The last two movies have scored an average of 95 like. Okay. Now, Bill and I sort of predicted this one might not be that high.
Yes or no?
Okay, yes. which is part of the fun here. So, okay, did you like the movie? Okay, or not? Please vote.
Yeah.
The votes are rolling in. Where 82% of folks have voted. So get those votes in.
Yes, get those in.
Should have a pop-up on your screen.
Okay, and we'll know the answers in a second.
There you go.
There we are.
And by the way, here at Let's Go to the Movies, we don't contest votes.
Yes.
So what have we got here? Yeses, 92%, noes, 8%. I'm in seventh heaven. My goodness gracious. Because this is such an unusual film. So if you saw my intro, you heard me say that there is a ground rule tonight. The ground rule is that we all know this film is flawed. and we could all name 5 or 6 flaws in this film. But I thought it would be fun tonight, and we're going to do this from time to time, to say, we don't want to talk about the flaws. We want to know what you liked about this movie. And I think that that is in some ways more interesting. Now, if some of you really just can't stand that rule and there's just something you have to say that's negative, we will not cut off your audio. We promise that. But we really do want to hear some positive stuff about a movie that in its own way is very adventurous. And Bob, before we open it up, I want to ask you something, or comment that you really taught me something about this movie that I didn't know, which was that for our folks out here who saw it in the last week, if there were things about the way the story was told and the way it bounces from one century to another and it goes back and forth and back and forth, if that seemed confusing, that may be because Paramount, without Vincent Minnelli's permission, cut how much out of this movie?
1 hour. 1/3 of the movie is not seen. The one that Minnelli developed with Alan J. Lerner, not even in the film. And that goes because what was going on in 1970, Paramount was owned by this big banking corporation, and they were looking at the musicals that were written just before this and then were made into films, and they weren't doing very well. And remember, Barbara Streisand was still, she was a big hot star because of Funny Girl. But so they decided they did not want to invest in 3 hours of film, which is a lot more money, because a lot of the theaters don't like 3-hour movies because you have one less showing a night. And so they only, if the movie's really special, do you want to do a 3-hour film. And the studio decided this movie and how its potential audience, we're just going to invest in 2 hours of the film. So they cut it to 2 hours.
Huh.
And that we lost a lot of songs, we lost a lot of humor, we lost a lot of, I think, the flow of the entire movie. But it's the bottom line about motion pictures are when you sell a film to the studio, they own the copyright, they own the film. If this was Broadway, the Alan J. Lerner could say, no, you can't do this. But in Hollywood, it doesn't work that way. The screenwriter doesn't have control of the final product.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. So if they decide they cut an hour, they cut an hour. They can do anything because they own it. And I was thinking, as when Bill and I were talking about this, one of the reasons so many of those great movies were done in the MGM in the 40s, because you had Arthur Freed, this famous producer. We don't always give the producer credit, but the producer is the one that decides how long the movie is, what to cut, what not to cut, what the director is. So they really have a lot of say. And in this case, the producer was not a well-known producer, and he had to deal with Paramount, and they made the final decision. And that's just the way it is. So it's kind of a shame.
And so one of the things that you missed because they cut an hour out of this film is you missed the chance to see and hear Jack Nicholson sing.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a pirated recording of it. So come over to my house and I'll play it for you. And he's really good. He's really good. So let's open it up. And I think I'm not going to ask, what did you like about it? I think maybe that's the wrong question. I'm going to ask you all, what were you struck by in this movie in a positive way? What were you struck by?
Laurel has a response. Laurel?
The costuming was gorgeous, and it was dead on. Okay, it was gorgeous when she was Melinda, but it was dead on for the 60s, which is the time period, supposedly. So I really enjoyed that, and I noticed it much more than I sometimes do.
Yeah. And as Bob and I can tell you, Vincent Minnelli was known for visually beautiful films. And the costume designer for Melinda in the 19th century London was none other than Cecil Beaton, who had done the costumes for Lerner and Lowe's My Fair Lady. Remember the ascot gavotte that's all black and white? That was Cecil Beaton's genius. Good. I'm glad you like the way the film looks. I do think it looks really, really gorgeous. Who else was?
I thought that it was so 60s. I mean, the whole thinking, the whole thought. I couldn't take myself back fast enough.
So you like that decade?
Yeah.
Lynn, were you a hippie in the 1960s? I should ask you that.
You know what? I have to be really truthful. I was so villager. It was sickening.
Bridget, you have a comment, Bridget? Go on. Bridget?
Sorry, had to unmute. Yeah, my favorite scene of all was the one where she's in her bedroom and she can't sleep. And I couldn't get over the intensity of the wallpaper and how it was echoed in the dress of the other version of her, and how her nightgown matched her bed sheets, which matched her pillowcases. It was just so fantastically floral, which was perfect for her character.
Vincent Minnelli again. Yeah.
Glenn, you were going to say something, Glenn?
Yeah, first of all, I think that I watched your preview and I think you set the expectations fairly low, and that may be why I enjoyed the film so much. But I really did enjoy the film, and I didn't see as many flaws as you were alluding to. I was struck by every one of her outfits. Her hat matched her clothes. Like somebody used the same fabric, right, to make the hat and the clothes. And I was thinking, like, how common? That's not very common. You know, that's just.
Oh, I know.
That's
Vincent Minnelli.
Hollywood.
Howard, you have something to say, Howard? Go on.
Yeah, I do.
And then let Wayne speak. He's had his hand up for a while.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just be brief. That one song, Come Back to Me,
Yeah.
fabulous. That made the whole movie as far as I was concerned.
That's really shot very imaginatively by Minnelli. I agree.
It was brilliant.
So Debbie, who did you say was next?
Oh, Wayne, and then Cynthia Dettelbach has her hand up too.
Okay, great.
Good.
Hi. And actually, I just want to start off by saying thank you for doing this tonight. I think it's really great and important to do. But I also want to just say I was really struck by just hearing that an hour was cut out of this movie and that it still made sense. I mean, usually you hear about movies being cut to, like a movie that's cut to ribbons like that.
Yeah.
They usually don't turn out as well as this one did. And this was a movie that was new to me, and I really liked it too. I thought it was really good. And another thing that struck me was you forget how inherently funny Barbara Streisand is.
I know.
You just think of her, that beautiful voice, or the things that you hear about her, dominating film sets and whatever, or dominating films, whatever, and you forget how funny she is. And she's so funny in this, I thought. I also wanted to say, listening to your intro, I was expecting Montan to be a real dud. I thought he held his own. I really did. I feel like, and I kept thinking, he's really not intimidated by her. Like, sometimes you see Streisand in a film and you kind of sense that there's intimidation going on, or people being a little cowed by her or intimidated. I think he tried to meet her toe to toe. Whether or not they had any chemistry, that's another question. But I thought he was fine. And
good.
Yeah. I think part of that too is that we don't realize in France he was a very big star. He was discovered by Edith Piaf, and he became a real cabaret star. So he thought he was a singer. He had a lot of confidence in that too, as she did. I think they both had lots of confidence, and that's maybe why that's the way what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Another reason that that he was not intimidated by her, and I agree with that, is he was literally twice as old as she was. She was 26 and he was 51. So that may have had something to do with it. And actually, Wayne, the lack of chemistry doesn't really bother me too much here, because they're not a romantic pair. They're not set up to be a romantic pair. But as Bob knows, on Broadway, they were. It was Dr. Mark Bruckner and Daisy Gamble, and at the end of the Broadway show, they wind up together. So this was a big change that Lerner made, and I think it's a good change.
Mm-hmm. This is one of the few romantic musicals where the two leads don't kiss.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
It's really an exception to.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay, we have some more questions here.
Cynthia had her hand up, and Stephen Bell.
Okay,
For me, the whole movie, there are three reasons I love the movie. Streisand, Streisand, Streisand. It was incandescent. Anytime she was on screen, I mean, it was like a halo was over her.
Yeah.
And there's nothing she could do wrong, in my opinion. One cute, stagey thing that I enjoyed. She was, by the way, as incandescent and as lively as the flowers that she grew. And I love the playing with the flowers that when things were good, the flowers bloomed prolifically. And then in the doctor's office, when things were bad, they all died. I thought that was a very clever through thread through the movie.
and this is why, by the way, when the producers cut an hour, I don't think they cut anything that she was in. I think everybody else got her cut, but she didn't, because they knew that was where the money is for the movie and the success more than anything else. So the other actors, it's just the way it is. Yeah, she was the star.
I'm going to put in a plug for the songs, which I think are first rate, by Alan J. Lerner and Burton Lane. And if you guys do not have the recording of this show, well, I'm going to say, don't get the soundtrack from the film. Get the Broadway cast. And it has so much more stuff in it, including comedy material, production numbers. Some of you complained that there are no dance numbers in the movie, and that's pretty much true. There were in the Broadway show. And in addition to Barbara Harris, her co-star was John Cullum, who later became a TV star very eccentrically in
Man from Uncle.
Northern Light.
North by Northwest. North by
Northern
Northwest.
Exposure.
Northern Exposure.
Yeah.
Remember that?
And became a big Broadway star. Several Tony Awards.
Steve, you had something, Steve?
Yeah, I've loved this film ever since I saw it, I think at Radio City or something. It was a big premiere. I remember at the time the scene where she's trying to escape from the orphanage and ends up hanging that, pulling that woman over the wall. I remember as a child laughing at that scene for the next 10 minutes and missing part of the film. But this time in watching it, and I've seen it several times over the years, her costumes as Daisy Gamble, it's got to be over a dozen different perfectly coordinated costumes. What really struck me was that nobody else in the film was dressed anywhere near that. You'd think with all the background extras and everything that somebody else would be dressed in this way, but she was completely different. And I kept wondering, doesn't she have like a blouse and a skirt? Is everything a coordinated dress with all with the hat and the coat and the cape and the gloves and the shoes and everything else? But one of the things that really strikes me about this film is that everything was focused, obviously, on Streisand, which wasn't really so in the Broadway show. If you remember, William Daniels played Warren, her fiance. And in the show, he is always looking ahead, planning for the future. When we're 65 and on the SS Bernard Cohen and all these other movies, all these other things that are looking ahead. Whereas the doctor is looking at her in the past. And there was always a balance of which side is she going to go to? Is she like looking to the future, or is she part of the past? So that really sort of gets lost in this because we're just focused on Barbara.
Yeah, good point. Good point. I like that contrast between the two.
Okay, Bruce has got something. Bruce, you have your mic. You don't have your...
Sorry, Judy and I both were struck by the colors right from the top in that all those plants. Everything was in color, vivid color.
Right. Yeah.
John, you gonna say something?
Wait, but before that, I just want to insert, because it goes back to the other comment. The coordination of Streisand's costumes and Minnelli had so much to do with that. But we could also say that about how Vincent Minnelli handled Judy Garland in 1944 in Meet Me in St. Louis. It's just a hallmark of Vincent Minnelli's work. Okay, John, sorry, you were next.
Yeah, very, very substantive question. So whenever people will do an impersonation of Barbara Streisand, one of the features is always the long fingernails. That seems to be a trademark. And very much in this movie, and I'm just curious whether that predated this movie, whether this movie has something to do with that. That was just her style at the time.
I guess it would depend. In Funny Girl, I can't remember what her nails looked like. Stephen, can you remember what her nails were like?
Yes, I remember an article at the time about it, that she already had the long fingernails and did not want to cut them for this film. So what they did was they put putty at the ends of all of her fingers so that her nails didn't look quite as long, but she refused to let them cut her nails for the film.
Only an audience member of Let's Go to the Movies would know that. I salute you, Stephen. I do. We've talked so much about the look of this film, and I really love it that you appreciate that. But I want to see if we can go a little bit more into Alan J. Lerner's writing and his concept, because I think this is an amazing idea for a story in a Broadway musical. So, Debbie, how about if we take another survey? Can we do that?
Yes, we can.
And in this survey, we want to know how many of you believe in ESP and parapsychology.
Oh,
and
wow.
I may need to define parapsychology, or at least I had to look it up myself. It means mental phenomena that are inexplicable by orthodox scientific psychology. So, for example, by unorthodox, I mean hypnosis, telepathy, etc. How many of you believe in that, and how many of you don't? Okay, the lines are shifting on my screen.
Oh, we still have only about 60% who have voted. Oh, they're rolling in now.
They're rolling in, yeah. Wow, it's pretty close, 56. Well, that's really, we've got our 100% pretty much, right, Debbie?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so 44% yes, believe, 56% no. Pretty close, pretty close. As I said in the intro, this was a very personal story for Alan J. Lerner because he believed so fervently in ESP and the parapsychology and all that stuff. Can Bob and I ask you, and maybe I don't know whether you want to admit it or not, but you can always say that you know somebody who was. How many of you have been hypnotized in your life?
You were.
I don't think so.
On our honeymoon?
We were in a drinking establishment down in Nassau, and they tried to hypnotize me, but that's kind of why I don't believe in much of this. I found it hard to be true when they tried us.
Okay. Anybody else?
51 years ago.
Would anybody else admit to being hypnotized?
Yeah, I was.
Really? Okay. Say.
Except I couldn't get out of it. I mean, I was hypnotized way beyond. The hypnotist was actually sort of freaked out because I wasn't leaving. I stayed hypnotized.
Wow.
Maybe I still am.
Wow. I was hypnotized too when I was in college.
Yeah,
and we had a guest professor coming in, and I was hypnotized. And it sort of, what happened to me was like what happens to the student in the film. I was hypnotized and believed I was 5 years old. And those who saw me go under and then come back out said I was a really cute 5-year-old. So
did you regale them with your Peter Pan story from 5 years old, Bill?
Yeah, I didn't do that as part of the hypnosis, but that would have been entertaining. I could have sung "I Got a Crow." Anyway, anybody else hypnotized? Not in this group?
Oh,
Bridget was. Bridget was.
Bridget, were you hypnotized?
I was. Now, we did have a hypnotist come in college to my campus, and that
Yeah.
did not work out. So I didn't believe in it, but I have gone to a hypnotherapist at the Cleveland Clinic.
Really? Well, yeah. This is a very different era, and what in the 1960s was sort of considered, so way out there that it just wasn't taken seriously. By now, if the Cleveland Clinic is taking it seriously, we know it's time to do that, right? In addition to hypnosis, how about, have any of you ever sensed that something was going to happen and it did? Oh, there's Bridget again with her hand up. What happened with you, Bridget?
So I used to dream things sometimes before they would happen. And when my grandmother died, she had a stroke. And when she had the stroke, I was asleep in my bedroom, and I saw, as if I was from above my body, my parents getting up from their bed, coming into my room, and I knew that something was wrong with her. And then when I was at high school later that day, we went to the hospital and saw her. And then I went to school later that day, and when I was walking to one of my classes, I knew that she had passed.
Wow. That's a great example. Anyone else sense something that actually happened?
Bruce is waving frantically over there.
Oh,
I see
boy.
Bruce.
Actually, this is something like Bridget's. My father died on a trip out of the U.S., and I had taken him and my mother to the hospital, to the airport, and he said, "You don't need to walk us to the gates." This was back when we could still walk to the gates. And he shook my hand, and I said, "This is the last," my mind said, "This is the last time I'm ever going to see you." Never came back.
Wow.
It must have been interesting when the movie was made, because Lerner truly believed this, as Bill said, but Minnelli thought it was just total BS. So imagine him directing the actors in this. What are they supposed to believe? What are they not supposed to believe? Must have been really an experience.
Herb Drower, we haven't heard from you tonight. Can you hear me? Are you connected? We see you. I guess his audio's not on. Debbie, is that right?
Barbara, you have a comment?
Looks like it's on, but
Looks frozen.
Oh, okay. All
I had
right.
the same exact thing happened to me as what happened to Bridget. Exactly.
Wow.
My father was had been ill, was out of town. I went to see him. I flew home, and I had this feeling the minute I walked in my apartment, the phone was going to ring and he was going to be dead. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay. So that's why half of you
Mary's got
believe
something too.
in this.
Mary?
Neat.
I had that experience too. My husband and I were on a trip. We were sleeping in a motel, and my father-in-law appeared to me standing at the end of the bed. I woke up and I told my husband, "We've got to call the nursing home where he was at the time right away." I called, and they said, "We've been trying to reach you. Your father-in-law died last night."
Oh, okay. Okay. Alan J. Lerner would like this group. He would. These are good stories. I want to talk just for a minute about Alan J. Lerner's satire in this show. One of you, and I'll name the name, it was Bridget. Bridget emailed me one sentence. She said, "I hate Warren." Warren being, Daisy's boyfriend. And and I mean, do you want to talk sexism? But it really is satire, and it's satire on sexism in the corporate world at that time. And as we know, there is still sexism in the corporate world. But I think it's right on the money. And I think that with Warren, and if you get the Broadway album, you'll hear this, as one of you already pointed out. He has a terrific song called "Wait Till We're 65," and how life is going to be so great because everything is bought and paid for, and no medical bills and all this stuff. But really what the satire is about is learners satirizing any of us who are conventional. And Warren is just so darn conventional, which is why it's so cool that Daisy ends up, we think, with her hippie ex half-brother. Bridget, should we bring you back on to say anything more about Warren, or have you spoken by saying how much you hate him?
I have spoken. He's extremely controlling, and of course it is because of the corporate rat race, and he feels that drive to succeed. But I think you covered it pretty well. Thanks.
Okay. All righty. Well, we always get to the point in these Q&As where we sort of say, well, what is this film? What is this musical really about? It's about ESP and psychology and stuff. But what is it really about thematically? And we always have people like Daniel Hahn and Deborah Matthews, both of whom are here, who advance their ideas about what it's about. And so I want to hear from them, but I also want to share with you part of a long email I got this week. I love getting these emails from you guys. It's really fun. And this email came from Don Horn, who is actually one of our members who lives in New York. And he says, I'm just going to quote part of it, but he's going to tell you what he thinks this musical's about. He says, I love this movie. That's how he starts. And I'm not simply trying to adhere to your rule tonight. He says, I love the score, especially the title song, for the reasons that you talked about in the intro. Streisand's What Did I Have That I Don't Have thrilled me the moment I first heard it, and it still thrills me. Clear Day is for me about two things: change and authenticity. And he goes on to say, and the interaction between those two. He says, if our motivation for change is simply to please others, will it work? Nope. It's because Warren wants approval from his employer. The psychiatrist views current day Daisy as an impediment that keeps him from the person he really wants to be with, who is Melinda. The characters are so busy trying to become who they aren't that they don't embrace who they are. Isn't that good? That was good, Don Horn. Thank you for that. Daniel, we want to see your background and hear what you have to say about what this musical is about.
That was so profound. I'm just
oh, look, you gave us both Daisy and Melinda.
Well, that's what it's about, I think, for this film. I guess I would, if you've ever come across somebody in your life who made a profound impact on you completely unexpectedly, and whether or not you chose to pursue that or not, I think is fascinating, because she's a student in the classroom and she goes to him for help with this smoking, and they both see these things in each other that they draw out of each other. And I just thought that, just those incidental connections we make in life with people, whether or not they're pursued or whether they're passing moments. For me, what I most enjoyed, having never seen this before, not knowing anything about the Broadway musical, again, you're 100 batting 1,000 here. There was a moment in the movie when Barbra Streisand was going between like being hypnotized and not being hypnotized. And I thought, what a wonderful tour de force role for this powerhouse. And I was trying to think of another film where the female lead had so much meaty stuff in both singing and the acting and in completely different characters. And of course, people have spoken about the gorgeous costumes, but just so much stuff for one woman, and how she really knocked it out of the park. I was mesmerized by her every time she was on screen. I was fascinated by so much about the movie itself. And I just want to, this isn't really answering your thematic question, but I just can't not say something about Bob Newhart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how terrific he was. And maybe that does speak in some ways to the theme of this film about even his character arc, going from what he purports to believe in to the almighty dollar bending his will, and to just exactly 100% the opposite of what he personally believes. And about, you know, because the donor says do this or don't do this. So anyhow, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have seen it. And I also want to lastly say that I appreciated your, and I sent Bill a quick email, but I appreciated the ground rule for tonight. And I said he's either a genius or a madman for doing that with this particular film. But I do appreciate it because, you know, we don't come together as a group, I don't think, every few weeks to just complain and rip movies apart. I think we come to see what, you know, for those other reasons, that what might we not have seen in the film, or what other perspectives that this wonderful group can add to the conversation. So I'm grateful for that ground rule, which I'm abiding by tonight. And I want to get one of these headpieces for my head. I think I look pretty good, Bill.
Yeah, well, you know, I could do a ground rule like that because it's this group. You guys, we've become so bonded by now. You know, I mean, I would like this group to grow, but in a way I don't want it to grow because we just have so much fun with each other. Deborah, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything that you want to add just in terms of thematics in this movie, what you were struck by?
Sure. I was mostly struck by the fact that the doctor insisted that all of this was impossible. And the reason why Melinda attracted him was the challenge to his very firm, I am right stance.
Yeah.
And, you know, that ability to sort of say, whoa, what more is out there? And then conversely, you have Daisy, who has absolutely no self-confidence whatsoever. And here this person is paying her some attention, and she doesn't understand, she misunderstands why he's paying her attention. But all she really needed was that boost of confidence to let her finally say, hit the road to Warren.
Yeah. I'm glad she said hit the road to Warren. That was a good choice. And
Bill
is nodding her head. Yeah.
Bill, I have a question about the songs. I really enjoyed the theme song towards the end of the movie, but I wondered if the technology for this impacted how it was received. I found that a lot of the songs I couldn't understand a lot of the words, and it seemed like, you know, they weren't as booming as Streisand can be.
I don't know. I wasn't affected that way, but I mean, I got all the lyrics.
They seemed like they were dubbed.
Oh, they would have been dubbed. Yeah.
But I don't remember that from other movies at that time.
I don't know. Bob, you always have something to say about the technical characteristics. You want to chime in there?
Yeah, this was made the traditional way of where you record the music first, and then you mouth it when you perform it. That was always done this way until in the last few years. Just technically, you can have an earpiece and the orchestra in your ear. So that was how it was traditionally done, and they just recorded it and they had to mouth the words, which is not easy to do, by the way. And but I think they pulled that off pretty well. The other thing that sometimes helps is when you get these movies to put closed caption. I really try to do that for every musical because you really get the words that way.
Yeah,
that's good idea.
And that's what I did with this movie because I mean I've heard this album a lot of times, seen this movie a couple of times. It really made clear the lyrics when you actually see them on the screen in the lower third. So think about doing that.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good idea. I want to point out, I think this relates to something Daniel said earlier, that one of the cool things about Alan J. Lerner as a writer for me is that his female characters are always really interesting. And his male characters, well, in his musicals, in any couple, each member of the couple learns from the other person. And that's very much true in My Fair Lady, for heaven's sake. And, you know, we can talk about Eliza's elocution, which is terrific. But for me, what's moving about My Fair Lady is how much Higgins learns about himself and his own loneliness and all of that deeper stuff, that she has a profound effect on him. And it's also true of Lerner and Lowe's Brigadoon. Tommy Albright, who is disillusioned, coming out of World War II and discovers this village and discovers Fiona, who changes his life, and he learns from her world. And I think it's also true here. They both learn from each other, and the arc, as Daniel would say, of the psychiatrist's character and where the doctor winds up in terms of his own openness, you know, that has come from Daisy Gamble, which I think is really neat. In some ways, Lerner was ahead of his time in writing stories about men who had to learn from women or they would be lost, you know?
You can say the same thing also for Camelot, Bill, too.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, in Learn, you know that old cliche, do what I say, not what I do? It really applied to Lerner, who was married and divorced 8 times. so there were things along the way he did not learn.
John, you had a comment?
Yeah, actually more of a question. What struck me is that the songs, I think up until the last one, were never from one character to another. And I know that that's always a struggle of how an audience is going to react, especially in a movie musical.
In a movie, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was just curious as to where, if anyone has any sense as to where that fits. Was that normal for that time?
I think it was a time, and Bob will tag team me on this, it was a time when movie musicals were having a tough time in terms of attracting audiences, because a lot of people in those audiences would not buy the notion that one character could sing to another in a movie. So they were experimenting with other ways of presenting those songs. Am I right about that, Bob?
Yes, and they were like what happened a few years later when we did the music videos, where it's a solo song, you know, one person alone in a scene or whatever, not singing to anybody in particular. It was sort of a style that sort of developed. I think Bill's right on that one too. Yeah.
And let's go back to something Chris said about how he really enjoyed the title song. And I made a big deal about that song in my intro, and the fact that it took Alan J. Lerner 92 drafts to write that lyric over a period of 8 months. Oh, geez.
Stephen has something to say.
But it's a really, I think it is a magnificent lyric and melody by Burton Lane that has spiritual dimensions to it. And I just wondered, because it's a song we've been hearing for so long, it's a song we tend to take for granted, but in the context of this story, I wonder if you sort of heard that song in a new way in this context. Anybody? I mean, it works for me on that level as a deeper song that has deeper implications if you want to go there. Which is why
I woke up this morning, Bill.
92 drafts. What, Lynn?
I woke up this morning, Bill. The first thing out of my mouth to Chris was, okay, so on a clear day, you can see forever. And Chris looked at me and he says, Yeah. And that just let her know who she was. Isn't that what you said? Yeah.
Yep.
Kate, you have something to say, and also Stephen. So, Stephen, why don't you go next?
All right, the comment that I had about people not really singing to each other, that's kind of tailor-made for the film, where things were centered on Streisand. Even one of the songs, which is actually "She Wasn't You," which was sung to Melinda,
right.
In this case was reassigned to Streisand, and so she was singing it about the other characters in there rather than to them. But many of the songs, not many, but several of the songs in the Broadway show were actual duets and conversations and sung to other characters. It's really just the way it was shaped. I think that this was a step on the way to Yentl, for example, where she sang every song off camera, rather than as part of the film itself.
Yeah, I agree.
You have something to say, Keith? Keith?
Yeah, you had mentioned about how the male character, learned off the female character, but the current musical Once is the same thing, where the male character does learn off of that too as well. And then I thought the lyrics were so astute and spot on.
Yes.
That kind of thing too going on. And I just have a quick question for Lynn. It's probably inappropriate, but since she was so village, I want to know if she burned her bra. Thank you.
she'll tell you. She'll tell you.
You know what? I know she will. I know she would tell me. That's why I asked her.
You have anything to say about that, Lynn?
You know what? I smoked cigarettes, but I never burned anything else but that.
Uh-huh. Wow. Okay. All right.
I'll admit to that.
Okay. Good enough. Good enough. We're going to move on to. Oh,
Bill,
Debbie.
I have a quick confession. Is that I've always liked that title song, but I just didn't think it fit in with the whole gestalt of the movie, and maybe because he wrote it 92 different times. Huh. I just thought that, I mean, you can stretch it and kind of make it fit, but it didn't fit as naturally to me as a lot of the other music does in the productions. So
okay, all right, interesting to hear. I think we're going to move into miscellany because we got a bunch of it today, and then of course we'll go to the diehards as we always do. We have 5 miscellaneous items. And thank you. That was a really neat discussion about a movie I wasn't so sure people would dig. And I'm really glad that you did. Miscellany number 1. I hope this doesn't disappoint you guys too much, but we want to try an experiment. And we're going to move this series to 1 a month for a while and see what that feels like. I have this feeling that it might feel more special if we just do 1 a month, and it might also help us grow the audience for it. But if we try this for a while and you just say to Bob and Bill, hey, come on, work a little harder and let's do 2 a month, then we'll be back with you. But we want to try that as an experiment. So it's going to be the first Thursday in every month, except not on February 4, because if we do this on February 4, we would be competing with ourselves. And here is why. This is a commercial, guys. It's a commercial. We have a co-production coming up with Caramoo House in February, running February 4, which is when we would be doing Let's Go to the Movies, running 4 through the 28th. That is a free online concert special. And some of you may have seen this concert 2 years ago when we did it live on stage at Caramoo. It's sold out. And Shuffle Along is a significant Broadway musical. It was one of the first ever created and performed entirely by African Americans. and this was in 1921. So in 2021, we're celebrating the centenary. We did the concert 2 years ago, as I mentioned. Tony Sias, who is president of Karamu and also a terrific performer, he and I co-hosted it with 3 amazing vocalists and 4 amazing musicians. And some of you who come to this series, I have never seen one of our multimedia, spectacular, full-length concerts. So we want you to see this, and we didn't have to rehearse it again because Tony and I were smart enough to have it videotaped 2 years ago with 3 cameras. So as Bob Knoll would tell you, that means it's going to be pretty high production values. And we're very proud of it, the way it looks, the way it sounds, and it's going to be easy for you to access. I don't think they're up and ready yet for you to go online, but it's going to happen soon. And it's just going to karamuhouse.org, and it's all on demand. So please come to the impact of Shuffle Along. The big hit song, by the way, in 1921 was I'm Just Wild About Harry.
About Harry.
Yep, there you go. That's number 2, miscellany. Number 3, so we will next meet on Thursday, February 11. And Bob, Knoll, what's the next movie musical?
Well, Bill and I thought, here it is the middle of winter. What we need is a summertime musical. So, and a classic. And a great example of that is Meredith Willson's The Music Man, with Robert Preston recreating his role that he did on Broadway, and Shirley Jones co-starring as Marion the Librarian. So come on to River City, Iowa, 1912. Once again, that's Thursday, February 11th at 7 p.m. As usual, Bill will do his intro about a week before, okay? We can really learn a lot from him when doing that. It is a great musical. Yeah.
And Debbie Schinker was so happy to hear that news that she flashed a heart on her screen. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Debbie. Number 4, piece of miscellany. You know what comes next. This is my favorite slide. When I mentioned that if you enjoyed the session tonight and the intro that we put out the week before, please consider making a donation today at any level that is meaningful to you. We are very pleased and proud of this series. We've only been doing it for 9 months. The organization is more than 20 years old. This is a relatively new program, and it has become an important part of our programming at the Musical Theater Project. So thank you for being part of it, and also for all the suggestions and feedback that you continue to give us along the way. We really take that seriously. Final piece of miscellany, and you know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to share a lyric with you. And I mentioned that I wanted to share a lyric that relates to what happened yesterday. And the lyric is by tonight's lyricist, Alan J. Lerner. He wrote the song with Leonard Bernstein for a musical that was written during the bicentennial year called 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And they wrote this musical as a response to Watergate, produced in 1976. So the house that is referred to in this song is the White House, but if you substitute our capital, it's still the same idea. Take care of this house. Keep it from harm. If bandits break in, sound the alarm. Care for this house, shine it by hand, and keep it so clean the glow can be seen all over the land. Be careful at night. Check all the doors. If someone makes off with a dream, the dream will be yours. Take care of this house. Be always on call, for this house is the hope of us all.
Oh,
I think there's nothing to be said after that, except thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm really glad we did decide to go ahead and do it. And we will, in just a minute, move on to the diehards. Thanks and good night.
All right.